I believe that our civilization is at a crossroads. Either we continue destroying each other, or we make the connection that the only chance we have to see the end of terrorism is to end extreme poverty.
Leading from the front as a Marine Recon officer in Iraq, to leading a humanitarian aid mission, attacking the poverty roots of terrorism in some of the most insecure areas of Africa. Jake Harriman keeps adding new dimensions to leadership and service as a servant warrior. He's now leading the charge to reform American politics by challenging candidates to choose country over party. As part of the Marines Memorial Association's tradition of honoring commitment and sharing timeless leadership lessons learned in all walks of life, the conversation continues in this online extension of what normally takes place at the Marines Memorial Club, a public, nonprofit hotel, theater, restaurant, and event space in downtown San Francisco, serving generations past and generations to come for nearly 75 years and counting. I'm Correspondent Mike Cerre, and this is Leading from the Front. The personal opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of the Marines Memorial Club. Jake Harriman, welcome to the Marines Memorial Club by way of Washington, D.C. You've been here before, haven't you?
I have indeed, yes.
Your extraordinary career in and out of uniform has really brought a whole new category of leadership into light, one called servant warrior. Is that something that was always something on your mind, or is it something that evolved through your various military and civilian careers?
I think it's something that evolved over time. I learned from so many of the great leaders that I worked for. And I think even more importantly, most of the most fundamental lessons of leadership I actually learned from those I had the privilege of leading. So members of my team, guys in my platoon, members on my staff at Nuru or now at More Perfect Union. I've always learned the greatest lessons about leadership from them. And they've taught me a lot about this concept of serving as a key component of leadership.
But this servant warrior, it's a lofty term, but it might have some obvious contradictions when you think about it. One, a warrior fighting, taking lives, and then servant helping and saving people. Was there any contradictions? Was there a yin and yang pull on that at all for you?
Well, I think in the beginning, it's not really philosophical. It's about what type of leadership delivers results. Mm-hmm. And what I found, whether it's on the battlefield or in remote rural Africa or in the athletic field or in the corporate boardroom, servant leadership is the most powerful form of leadership I've ever come across. You can untap hidden potential on teams that you never even knew was there to accomplish impossible tasks that your team did not think could be done.
So what part of the equation drew you in first? Was it the warrior part drawing you into the Marine Corps?
I'd always felt this kind of call of duty to really serve in that way as well. And I think I was very drawn to the warrior component of leadership. Now, I will say that, but I was also very naive at the time. I had no idea what combat was, no idea what war was all about. And frankly, no real idea about the military outside of a couple stories from my dad at the time. But, I was very drawn as a young man to the kind of warrior ethos.
What about growing up in rural West Virginia like you did? Did that have an impact on you about trying to help improve people's lives?
Absolutely. I looked to my parents and the impression that they left on me in my leadership style. We grew up in poverty and by American standards, but I never knew it as a kid. My parents were amazing at doing everything they could to provide for us. We got everything we needed to eat we lived off the land, whether it was through our crops or hunting or our cow for milk, etc. But they taught me a lot about, my mom taught me a lot about compassion and mercy. My father taught me a lot about drive and this can-do attitude that you can do anything you want to accomplish in life. And they taught me that there's always someone in this world who is struggling a little more than you are. And so our job as human beings, as good people, as people trying to make a difference in this world is always to try to look for those individuals to try to give them some assistance, not a handout, but a hand up, like reaching out and partnering with them to find a better path. And I think an analogy that they taught me very early on was, if you see a man trapped down in a pit, you don't like yell at him from the top of the pit and tell him how to get out of the hole. You jump down in the hole with him and understand what his perspective is like, and then you try to work together to get out of the pit. And that really stuck with me, resonated with me as a young man.
And not to paint you with the hillbilly elegy that another former Marine officer wrote, J.D. Vance. I mean, you were a serial achiever, a football star, valedictorian in your class, president of your class. So you seem very comfortable in assuming these leadership roles throughout your life.
I think, I'm a big believer that you can have natural leaders, but leadership is very much a learned thing. And I would say I actually learned a lot about how to be a good leader. I was a very, before all those things you just listed, I was a very nerdy, introverted kid. I had, big glasses, braces, a little pudgy gut with suspenders I wore around as a little kid. I was the little nerd that everybody picked on. And so I wasn't naturally this kind of outstanding leader or anything in the beginning. And I learned a lot. Again, I want to emphasize, I learned a lot from those in my life that really cared about me, loved me, and wanted me to succeed. And I owe a lot to them about my leadership.
Well, most humanitarian career tracks do not include 2 combat tours of duty in Iraq, some special operations deployments as a Marine Recon officer. But how did you connect the dots between making that transition as a warrior with the Marines to starting Nuru, a humanitarian organization for battling poverty in Africa?
Well, my guys and I, when we were in combat, we saw this, what we thought was a really critical gap in our national security strategy. We were going out there, whether it was first in the invasion or later on in a following tour, we were out there taking these guys out every night in capture kill missions, and the movements kept growing. They kept continuing to infiltrate and grow in size and strength. And at first we couldn't figure out what was going on, but over time we began to realize that they were exploiting the conditions of desperate, extreme poverty in a lot of these fragile areas that we were working. And these groups were actually doing aid work. They were dropping off food, they were building schools, they were building clinics. And yes, they were horribly oppressive, but if you're a desperately poor farmer, what real choices do you have? There's no real meaningful choices there. And the aid industry, the aid groups couldn't reach these folks. They couldn't get out there. DOD had us out there trying to help, but we were trained to take out targets. We weren't trained to help farmers. So there was a real gap there that I think needed to be addressed, and that my guys and I talked about. And so our goal was to plug that gap. I thought if you could take guys like us with our background and our skill set, combine them with frontline development professionals who know how to combat poverty and build locally led models in these tough places, we can embed for years in these communities where other NGOs could not reach, to build strength and resilience in these communities and locally led solutions that could stop the spread of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
So you really made the connection between poverty and terrorism, much like I think General Mattis is saying, if you don't support the foreign aid, you got to buy me more bullets, and
Right.
you don't have enough money for all the bullets I got to buy. So having made that connection, so after 11 years of service in the Marine Corps, you leave and then you go into this other alien world called the Stanford Business School.
About that time, my best friend, a guy named Don Fall, who'd also been a Force Recon Marine and had spent a lot of time with me at the Naval Academy and also in the Marine Corps, he had gone to Stanford Business School and had told me, look, you should come up here. There's a great network. You can build out a reputation for yourself and some support, build and acquire the tools you need to build a company. And I thought, there's no way I'm getting into Stanford Business School. Like, what's a Marine hillbilly from West Virginia going to do to get into Stanford Business School? I come home from one of my interim jobs was to pay. I was driving a seafood delivery truck to pay rent, as I tried to figure out how to build this new thing. And there on my front desk, man, was the acceptance letters from both Stanford and Harvard. I couldn't believe it. And I guess they had some quota for a West Virginian from in the Marine Corps that year or something.
Yeah, you fit it. Very special quota. How was that cultural adjustment going from the Marine Corps
or driving a seafood truck, delivery truck to the Stanford Business School.
It was a it was a radical change to say the least. I think, you know, it was funny. I am a flawed human being. I made judgments I should not have made. I went up to Stanford thinking this is a liberal elitist institution that's going to hate me if I tell them who I really am. So I actually didn't tell them anything about my background. So then over time, those folks in my class became just really close friends, and I had totally underestimated them. You know, they didn't put me in a box. In fact, they helped me build Nuru. Over 30 of them came together and helped me do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the amazing part of the story. You talk about Stanford's famous as being an incubator for some of the top technology companies in the world. Uh, and Don Fall was right. You went there and it helped you incubate a company. How were you able to get Nuru off the ground before you even got out of the Stanford Business School?
Well, I'll tell you, it was extraordinarily difficult. But you know what? Like, I'm a Marine, and I put my mind to something. Like there's no stopping. I might have a bloodied forehead from running into a brick wall 1,000 times, but I'm going to get through that wall. And I was basically going to class, and then from class I'd be dashing to these donor meetings to try to raise this money. And you know, I'd do 20 out of 20 donor meetings, I get like one maybe. You know, but I just kept at it, kept at it, kept at it. And finally, it really was my class. You know, they heard my story. They really believed in me. I was only at Stanford Business School to do this one thing. I wanted to build this company that could stop extreme poverty in highly fragile places. And they came around me. They helped me do the research. They held this huge party at the end of the year. I was having trouble getting off the ground and get started raising money. And so they said, hey, I want you to come and give this speech at this party. We're all going to chip in some money. So we were able to raise about $350,000 by the time I graduated. So I was able to move to Kenya with the small team I'd hired to get started.
So you had the business plan, you had some training from Stanford, and you hit the ground in Kenya with all kinds of enthusiasm to change the world, reverse this intractable problem of anti-poverty. So how did things work out once you got there?
Yeah, not so well. And you're not going to believe me, but the first week I got on the ground, I was attacked by a pack of thieves. Our hut we were living in got swarmed by black widow spiders and safari ants. We had an earthquake. I got malaria. And then the last day of the week, which was my birthday, I got struck by lightning. And I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. I thought something is wrong here. Somebody doesn't want me here. And
I mean, you think of bad days in the Marine Corps. I mean, you pulled off, this is amazing.
I couldn't believe it. And here I was, I thought I was this tough, operator or whatever, coming in here. I was going to do whatever, go up against the odds and do this thing. And I was defeated. I thought, I need to go back and do something easier like combat.
Why were you so confident that you actually could? Forget about the malaria and the lightning and the ants and whatever. How did you think you really could make a difference? There's a lot of humanitarian organizations, much larger, much more well-established than you, that are working in those areas and trying to deal with this intractable problem of poverty. How are you going to change the dynamics of agriculture in Kenya to make a better lives for these people?
I think it's a combination of two things. I think one is the Marine Corps. I mean, the Marine Corps trains us to do the impossible. They train us to, and maybe you call it brainwashing, they train us to believe that we can accomplish anything with nothing. They don't give us enough money or tools or equipment, but I'll tell you what, we accomplished some pretty incredible things, right? But I think sometimes like you need to be able as an outsider to take a look at an intractable problem and ask the questions nobody else is asking. Challenge the assumptions that everybody else believes to be true, right? That's the only way we find breakthrough solutions in the world is you have to have innovators who are willing to challenge what everybody else is thinking.
So what was Nuru and yours secret sauce to changing the agriculture dynamics of those villages that you were working in?
You're going to think I'm crazy, but it was leadership.
Just plain out and simple leadership.
Yeah, and here's what I mean by that. What I saw in the aid industry is I saw a lot of folks who were going out there to give things away to people. They were building clinics, they were building schools, they were handing out food, they were drilling wells and then walking away. They were going into these villages, telling people what they need, giving them those things, and then leaving, right? So inevitably, within 1 or 2 years, that program fell apart. The well would break. The school would start to fall into disrepair. They'd run out of supplies. The food would dry up, right? Those aren't sustainable solutions. What Nuru decided to do was we decided to tap into the incredible potential and talent and knowledge of these local leaders that were in these places. You know, they're some of the most brilliant, courageous people I've ever met in my life lived in these villages.
They have to be resourceful to survive
They
there.
have to. And let me tell you something. They know what the problems are, and they have some great ideas for solutions. You know, when I first got there, I remember I was talking to one of these women out in the village, and I was telling, she was starting to talk to me about her story, and I interrupted her, and I started telling her all these great programs that we were going to do there, and I was going to save her and all this stuff. In my arrogance, she interrupted me. She said, "Stop." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Stop. I don't need you to come in here and tell us what our problems are or what the solutions are. I've been living in this village with these other 10 women for 40 years. We know what the challenges are, and we got some really great ideas. We just need you to help us get started." And she completely put me in my place. And I thought to myself, this is where real strength lies. This is where the real solutions are, in the people living here. And so all I did from then on, I was just scaffolding. You know, what Nuru does is we go in and we unlock potential of local leaders and provide them the tools, equipment, and knowledge they need to design their own solutions that are sustainable. And we act as an infrastructure or a scaffolding around them to build a locally led organization until that organization can stand on its own and be sustainable. And then we walk away, and the organization continues to thrive and grow on its own.
Mhm. And you make it a point to the people that you have working with you on Nuru are a lot of former special operators like yourself, a lot of former Marines, a lot of former special operations guys.
Well, that's another thing we wanted to try to do to disrupt the industry. We wanted to work in places where traditional NGOs would not or could not go because it was too unsafe. So the idea was to form these composite teams, take former operators who understand combat, combine them with really smart development professionals who know a lot about agriculture, health, education, etc. And we would combine them in these hybrid teams and embed them and myself in these communities for years, slowly building relationships and building trust with local leaders so that we could co-create solutions together. And having folks with our background in combat in the special operations community, and the force recon community, in these types of communities allowed us also to add a security element. Now, not hard security, there's no weapons or anything like that, but it's understanding the dynamics of what enemy is in the area. We were just applying in the NGO industry, right, in a new way that allowed for development to be done in trickier, more fragile places than had been done before.
So your proof of concept was Kenya, then you moved on to Ethiopia, and now you're working in northeast Nigeria, the heart of Boko Haram terrorist territory. How's it working out? I mean, have you been able to scale this up?
They're doing incredible work in northeast Nigeria. They've scaled from their first 500 farmers to now they're scaling up to 2,000. They're having an impact, a much broader impact in the northeast, even during this time of COVID, when the situation became even more unstable and Boko Haram and ISIS were taking advantage of the situation. Nuru Nigeria was the only organization that was able to continue their programming up in that area, delivering solutions to Nigerians when everybody else pulled out. So the team is doing really amazing work there. I'm super proud of them.
Please welcome Presidential Leadership Scholar Jake Harriman.
So you've raised $60 million. You've affected the lives of more than 100,000 people. And then you decide to leave the field and come back to Washington to work on the Presidential Scholars Program that was started by former Presidents Clinton and Bush. Was this now to try to take what you learned and see if you could create policy to make more people able to do what you did?
Well, the program is designed to, number one, help me become a better leader, but number two, take our project and our methodology and model and scale it up to have truly national global impact, in our case, global impact in this problem of violent extremism. And through their introductions and their influence, we were able to start to work on policy. We've were able to, over a 3-year period, help draft and pass a major piece of legislation called the Global Fragility Act, which really changes the dynamic of how the U.S. government will engage in highly fragile areas.
So now you decided to pass Nuru on to some other folks to run it on a daily basis. And you decided to take on another mission impossible, and that is to form a more perfect union by recruiting a whole new breed of elected officials who place country first ahead of party and their own individual interests. We've seen the most divided portion of our country ever in this political process. What makes you think you can change that dynamic?
Well, I'll tell you again, it's not me, right? And one of the things I tell people I'm always the dumbest guy in the room when it comes to democracy reform. I know for a fact there's people smarter, faster, stronger to be able to do this. But honestly, at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself that age-old question: if not me, then who? Right? Like, I really felt like this problem. I have been blessed with a very unique set of experiences and network that kind of it's difficult for me to understand why I have this kind of access, but I do. I have been blessed with that, and I have a unique also background that seems to resonate with people both on the left and the right. And so the more I saw what was happening in the country, the more sad and angry I became. My guys and I, first in the Marine Corps, then in Nuru, had been downrange fighting for this idea that America stands for, this freedom of lasting, meaningful choices for everyone, for a long time, for 15 years, only to come home and see that it wasn't going to be ISIS or Al Qaeda or China or Russia that was going to defeat us. It was going to be us. And we were tearing ourselves apart with fear and division. And I thought, it doesn't matter how much great work we're able to accomplish overseas if the light of American democracy fails. And so I thought, our generation needs to step forward during this time and contribute and lead to help solve some of these problems here at home. We have to heal the nation. And I can't look around. I found myself, I can't look around and see who's the leader to get behind or what initiative can I help, and just be frustrated with the way things are going. You got to step forward and get in the fight. You have to step forward and get in the fight. And yes, it's audacious, and yes, it's crazy. Who cares? Like, that's the only way the world changes, is by regular people stepping forward to say, I'm going to do something about it.
Okay, so what's your vision here? What's your commander's intent here? How do you take obviously everyone will nod their heads and say, great, this is wonderful. How do you get to the end goal here?
So it's a large 10+ year plan, but I'll tell you the early beginnings of what we want to do is more perfect union. Two major things that we're doing at the same time. One is, this has to be rooted in the American people. So we're building a movement. We're building a movement around unity and reform, bringing the country together to heal, and reforming the political system so that it can deliver value again for the American people, so it can be functional and actually pass laws that meet the American people at the kitchen table. That's the first thing. We got to build this movement. We got to mobilize regular Americans. Second, at the same time, in 2022, we want to get 5 country first candidates elected to the U.S. Senate to form a powerful fulcrum in the middle of the Senate. We want to build a center in American politics. Now, these folks are going to run as Republicans and Democrats, but once they get in, they're going to vote as a bloc, as a powerful swing vote that can begin to shift the power from the extremists in the parties to the middle. And what we hope to do is, by doing that, we can begin to break through the gridlock in the Senate, and we can begin to move first legislation that can reform our political system: electoral reform, ethics reform, structural reform, campaign finance reform. Do real reforms that make sense on both the left and right for the American people. Get our government working for the people again. And
why not run them as truly independents? Can you, a lot of people say you can't get elected now as an independent.
That's exactly why. If you look at the data, if you look historically what has happened, there's a lot of good people who are independents who have tried, and there are one-off victories, but we've got to gain critical mass here all at once. It's a shock and awe campaign. We've got to get a lot of folks in at the same time so that we can, by the time we gain this momentum, it's too late for enemies to attack and tear it down. independents or third-party candidates, the barriers to entry that both the Republican and Democratic Party and their ecosystems have created in this harmful duopoly those barriers to entry prevent these independent candidates from winning and from getting in. And so I call it our insurgency strategy. We're going to get these folks in as Republicans and Democrats, and then they're going to unite on the inside.
Now, are you actually going to recruit people for this political insurgency, as you call it? And where are you going to find these people?
We are recruiting mostly special operations combat veterans for this mission. And these are people who don't want to do the job. They don't want to be U.S. senators. They've got other great things happening in their lives. Why would anybody want to be a U.S. senator right now? But we're going to these individuals and saying, look, you've got one more mission you need to do for this nation. The nation needs you. You've got great name recognition. You're highly competent. You're a brilliant professional. You can go in there. You can do this. You got a 6-year mission. You're going to go in. You're going to build the American Center, and then in a Cincinnati move, you're going to leave after that. And so these are folks who are not beholden to the party. They're not in there to build this career as a career politician. They have one mission. It's to go in and build the American Center, and then leave, and leave behind a better, more functional government for the American people.
And Jake, why not leverage off the core of veterans that are already in there now, guys like Seth Moulton and some of these other people? I mean, couldn't that be a base that you could start with, veterans who are already serving in Congress now?
So we want to work with veterans who are already serving in Congress. If you look at Rye Barcott and With Honor, they've done some amazing work in getting veterans into the House. The challenge of the House is a 2-year play. There's not enough time there to be able to get substantive disruption done. So we want to disrupt, build a fulcrum in the Senate, and then also work with RISE folks in the House too, in the 4-country caucus, to be able to move legislation through Congress. In our next iteration, 2022 is the first cycle. In our next iteration, 24, then 26, we want to work with incumbents. We want to work with folks like Seth, Mikey Sherrill, others, Mike Gallagher, who we can partner with then to move them up into the Senate as well, to begin to build out this fulcrum. Because what we want to see happen is either the two parties will reform and you'll see a moderate faction form up in both parties, or you can actually form a viable platform for a third party from within the system. Can't be done from without, but it could be done from within. The reason we don't work with these incumbents in the beginning is because it's too hard for them right now to break from the relationships they've already made. We want to inject new lifeblood and new culture into the Senate with folks who are not tied to any other entity other than this mission and the people who got them elected. And but through that disruption, then we can begin to attract some of these other incumbents.
Unfortunately, politics is all about the money. Do you have to get in this arms race, this political arms race, and raise the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to pull this off? Or do you think there'll ever be a time where it will resonate in such a way that you can do this without having to raise all the money and form the PACs and do all the things that politicians have to do these days?
Well, so one of the things we want to do is we want to disrupt that whole system. I talk about political reform. One of the big things we want to do is campaign finance reform, but that can only be done once the fulcrum is set. So we're going to use money to beat money. So we are going to have to raise a lot of money, but we're doing it in a smart way. So one of the components of our strategy is we plan to focus on primaries. Right? We're not going to be playing in the general elections. If you look at Senate primaries, there's not a lot of folks who even look into Senate primaries because they're forgotten races. Most of the money that you see when you hear these big numbers, 150, 200 million, 300 million, 500 million in Georgia that was done in these special elections, runoffs, general elections, it's because they're in the general elections. The parties are competing for that seat, to flip the seat. More Perfect Union is not going to flip the count in the Senate. We're just building the fulcrum. We're going to get moderate candidates through the primary in safe red and blue states so that they can then win the general and get into the seat. That's all we care about. We're not going after highly visible seats. We're not competing in races. We're not trying to flip the count. We're just getting these 5 in.
And you're going to count on the people that you've worked with before who've been on your left and your right, and you know we're going to cover your 6.
That's exactly right. We are recruiting servant leaders who have given everything they have when everything counted, when everything was on the line, who've been vetted by the men and women they led in combat to be able to vouch for them and tell us they will hold the line when it comes to it.
You wrote a letter to your daughter, which kind of is probably your mission statement that you shared with me. Could you read a couple of paragraphs on that? And is that really your mission statement?
Yeah, her name's Trinity, so I call her Trin. The time seems so dark right now with all the bitter division, fear, and confusion. But the darkest part of the night is right before dawn. When I look at you, Trin, I have so much hope for our country. You and your generation will write the next chapter in the story of American heroes.
So, Jake, you really are continuing to lead from the front, from Naval Academy, Marine Corps, Recon, Nuru International, and now making a more perfect union. Thanks for your time and good luck on your new endeavors. And we appreciate you sharing some of the invaluable lessons you've learned in so many different walks of life that you've experienced so far.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be on the show.
For more information on Leading from the Front and how you can support it and the Marines Memorial Association with your tax-deductible contribution during this challenging time, go to ourmission.marinesmemorial.org/lead.